to Argo Unpacked. Today, the titans of GitOps debate core Argo implementation. Is it GitOps or is it goose hockey? Of course, I'm referring to the controversial usage, or is it abusage, of target revision. That is a feature of Argo CD that allows you to specify exactly which version or revision of your Git repo that you want to use as your source of truth. And it violates a critical anti-pattern that we always talk about. Hey, welcome to Argo Unpacked, whatever this show is. I'm your host, Dan Garfield. We've got a great show for you today. If you're joining live, we'd love to see your comments. Throw them down below. We'll be addressing those as we go along. If you got questions, if you got topics that we want to cover, don't forget to like, subscribe, pull up a chair, invite a friend, pop some popcorn, because today is going to be a spicy meatball. All right. So before we get into today's debate, and I bring in our commentators, who I'm sure are going to have a lot to say, it's time for your favorite segment. Tip of the week. All right, today's tip is about your usage of Argo CD for the application layer versus the infrastructure layer. That's right. When we deploy stuff, there are typically at least two layers that we're thinking about. The infrastructure layer, think Terraform, servers, clusters, all that good stuff. And then you've got your application layer. Argo CD is deploying applications on top of Kubernetes. It's manifesting these things. Now it's designed, Argo CD is specifically designed to deploy stuff to Kubernetes. It's not really designed to think about infrastructure. It doesn't have built-in dependency management, for example, while things like Terraform do. Now, what we usually recommend is that you take something like Terraform and you have this do your long-running changes, stuff that doesn't change very often, right? So that's a server, that's a cluster, that's a number of nodes, things that don't change that often. Think things that might change once a month, maybe every 6 months, maybe once a year, or even less. That's Terraform, right? That's your infrastructure layer. But the thing that you do is once you've deployed your infrastructure, you deploy Argo CD and you have that handle the application layer, of course. So this would be deploying your applications, Prometheus, Grafana, whatever that stuff is that's there. And those things are getting changed more frequently. New containers, new versions, new Helm charts. Those are happening all the time if you want to stay secure. So that's what Argo CD is really designed for. Now, what a lot of people don't realize is that even though we have these two layers, you can actually start with one and finish with the other. So let me give you an example. Let's say I've got a bunch of values that I need on my cluster for my application to function, like a DNS endpoint or a workload identity or an ingress or whatever, something that needs to be there and needs to be brought up in a specific way. That doesn't mean that it has to not be part of Argo CD. What you can do is you can use Terraform to bootstrap all of those things and do it in your normal dependency-oriented way. And once they're deployed, you deploy Argo CD, usually with Terraform, and you have it point at a source of truth that references those things that you've already deployed on the cluster, at which point Argo CD will take over the management of those underlying infrastructure components. Then, if you need to update them, you just do it the same way you would update everything using Argo CD. Just make a change in Git. And it means you don't have to reapply the Terraform plan or make any changes to Terraform. You can be continually updating the dependencies or the components that you've deployed on your cluster as part of the infrastructure layer in an ongoing fashion. And that's when you pass things from your infrastructure layer to your application layer, from Terraform to Argo CD. So your tip of the week is that Terraform and Argo CD play really well together, and you can pass the ownership of objects from Terraform to Argo CD simply by having Argo CD to start syncing against the source of truth that Terraform was pulling from in the first place. So that's your tip of the week. Now, we got plenty of news for you coming up. Argo CD 3.5 is out. Very cool, a lot of great features. We're going to get into it. But before that, I want to introduce today's topic, which is, of course, focused on the controversial core implementation on Argo CD, and I'm being a little bit over dramatic. It's okay. We're going to have a friendly discussion. It's not really going to be that much of a debate, I don't think. At least I hope so. We'll see. Sparks may fly. But I'm talking about the use of target revision. Now, before I introduce the details of this topic, let me bring in our guests. These are the titans of GitOps, as I call them.
Argo Unpacked, special guests.
Okay, of course, we are adding Gerald Nunn, Christian Hernandez, Kostas Kapolonis. Now, of this group, the reason I call out the titans, okay, of GitOps is, first of all, Gerald, heavily involved in Open GitOps and its implementation, which many of you may be aware of. But also Christian is one of the original co-authors on the GitOps principles, along with myself and Kostas. So we've got some OG GitOps implementers. I mean, if you talk about like who defined GitOps and what it is, this is a lot of the group that's there. Now, Kostas has been the purveyor of best practices when it comes to Argo CD for a long time now. And everybody knows that we reference his blog posts like gospel because they have great information, great guidelines about how you should deploy Argo CD, how you should be using it. Now, this conversation really started in a controversial Reddit post a few weeks ago where someone was asking about how you manage your Kubernetes manifest. And Gerald, who's a very helpful guy and has a lot of great best practices in his own right, came along and shared a lot of opinions and ideas about this. But one of the things that he mentioned was the use of target revision for changing what version of things should be deployed. And like a good community member, somebody said, hey, setting target revision to something other than head is considered an anti-pattern. And he referenced this blog post that Kostas brought up. And Gerald said, it's not an anti-pattern, particularly with Kustomize, where you need to ensure that changes to the base are not immediately picked up by the overlays. Think dev, staging, production, etc. And of course, this led to some back and forth. I got involved. I was like, what are you talking about? How dare you? I threw a chair, which I'm not proud of. Gerald smashed a microwave on my head. And then Kostas came in from the top rope with the people's elbow, and it got serious. So we said, you know what? We can't settle this in Reddit threads. We got to settle this live in a discussion on Argo Unpacked. So we're going to get into this discussion and talk about exactly what that is. But all of that is the preamble for today's topic. Gerald, how did I do? Did I cover the intro adequately here in the debate?
No, that was good. I mean, I have more use cases than just the customized one in particular, but no,
you only get one.
I only get one. Okay, then we can go with customized. Okay. It's fine. But yeah, no, that was very good, Dan.
So let's look at I think maybe what we'll do first is maybe we can just revisit the suggested anti-pattern really quickly. So this is about anti-pattern number 11, which is abusing target revision field. And if we look at the target revision, here it is. This is kind of about the discussion of like, hey, how do I specify what version of things should be deployed? Should I just change the manifest in Git, or should I change the Argo CD application itself to just change what revision it's pointing to? And it leads to the situation where you have to continuously update the target revision field. Now, Kostas, maybe you can explain this anti-pattern the way that you view it. And I know that like what Kostas is going to want to do, he's going to be tempted to do, is he's going to be like, hey, man, these best practices aren't like rigid law. Like you can just do the stuff that works for you. These are general guidelines, and it's okay. If you have a good reason to break one of these rules, you can do it. You just know why you're doing it and have a good reason for it. He's going to want to do that because he's a peacemaker and he's nice. But this is a clash of the titans, so we don't need to apologize.
No, I will say something like this. Dan, can you also remove the... yeah, that's fine. No, I'm going to say something even more generic. Let's forget Argo CD for a moment. I think that every Argo project or every open source project should do something in the documentation which is not there right now, where for each feature the documentation describes, you should also say how often you expect your users to use this feature and whether this is like a common practice or something else. So you could read, let's say, the Argo CD documentation, and you could see notes, hey, this feature is production ready, everybody should use it, go ahead. But this feature is for this very special case, and you should only use it if you know what you're doing. And I will give a good example which has nothing to do with target revision, but I think a lot of people will recognize with multiple sources. Like multiple sources is a feature that did not exist in Argo CD for a very long time. It was created for a very specific scenario. You have a Helm chart that you want to use from an external entity, but you want to use your own values. And for this particular case, this feature was created. So if you look at the documentation, and for this particular feature, I've done my homework. I've written some warnings there. It clearly says, hey, before you use this feature, make sure that you are under this case. It's not like a feature that you use every day. And we have seen people at KubeCon that they have come to us and they have said they have a cluster where they have a single Argo CD application with multiple sources for everything, like 20 applications in the multi-source feed, which is obviously an anti-pattern. So that's the general, let's say, overview that I think a lot of Argo CD features are abused because we do not explain to people how often they should use it. So coming back to the same discussion about target revision is great, okay? But if you do use it, I expect you to have done your research. I want to ask you, hey, why you have changed the target revision field? And a correct answer for me would be, we have evaluated A, B, C, D, and we think that D is the best in our case, and this is why. Amazing. But if I ask you, why are you putting dev in target revision, and your answer is, we always did it like this since I came in the company, and I never changed it, then no. Like if you don't know why you're doing it, okay? So that's, let's say, the peacemaker sentence. The anti-pattern is people changing the target revision, and it's actually two separate aspects. One is changing it all the time to something. So you have an application, you have target revision, and you start dev. No, it's QA. No, it's production. No, it's back in QA. No, it's my branch. Okay, it's not even a static environment. Okay, that's one thing. And the other thing is changing it in a way to try to lock down developers. So let's say in production, you put it to a specific Git hash or a specific Git version, which is, let's say, 1.13. So whatever a developer does, nothing actually happens. Like you force developers to have a second step where they need to go and change the target revision, which maybe it makes sense, but maybe it doesn't, especially, for rollbacks or if it's 3 a.m. in the morning. So these are two separate, let's say, aspects. The blog post contains, let's say, many more, but these are the anti-patterns I see. So first one is using target revision as a poor man's promotion engine, dev QA staging. And the second one, try to lock it down, not only make the life of developers difficult, but also not understanding what locking down means. Because I have also an example that with default GitHub settings, you can actually overwrite a tag. So you can go, at 1.13, make a commit, delete the previous one and commit it again. So you haven't really locked anything. So, sometimes I ask people why you have done this. For security reasons, because we're a financial company, and for auditing, we need to know. Okay, and how do you enforce that Git tags are immutable? They are. No, they are not. Unless you make them immutable and also your containers immutable, nothing is immutable. Same discussion, for containers, where people think that a tag is like 1.13, speaking about the container, is immutable, which is not. Like this is not, anywhere in the specification. Maybe your registry can have the capability to make it immutable, but by default, it's not. So that's the intro on my side. Now fire away.
That was great. I think one thing maybe Kostas and I can agree on quite easily is that using things like the git commit hash for the target revision is not a great idea, and that Semver or some variation of Semver is probably the way to go on that one if you're going to use target revision. So for me, there's really kind of multiple use cases where target revision is very useful. And I think this also ties into the adding pattern. I think it was 19, which is about promotions. as well, because it kind of covers into how to use main or how to use head successfully as a target revision. And it's doing some things in there that I really don't like. But really for me, some common use cases are Kustomize. You got bases and overlays. I want to make a change to a base, but I don't want it to flow into my other environments or other clusters until it's fully tested in a pre-cluster or a pre-dev environment or the dev environment. The other one is Helm charts. So with Helm charts, for example, particularly Helm charts that are brutal in terms of the value files being large and complex, a pattern I tend to use is I have a base Helm file, sort of use the customized terminology, but I have a base Helm file that has, the 1,000 lines of values and everything in it. And then in different environments, I'll just override it with a handful of things that need to be overwritten on an per environment basis, right? And again, how do I make changes to that base value file and not have it flow across all the environments? The third one for me, and kind of from a classical enterprise position, is that in an ideal world, we'd all be doing trunk-based development. Every commit you make to the repo automatically ends up, minutes later or half an hour later in prod, right? The full CI/CD. But the reality for me is that most of the enterprises that I work with don't work that way. They have rigid change control processes that they must follow, right? So the issue with that is that people are making PRs, and typically the release window will be every 2 weeks, a month, 2 months, whatever it is, and they need to batch those up, right? So for me, target revision in that case is a much better solution than having release branches, which is the other way you can go to manage that. So those are the kind of the counterpoints for me, is that target revision is really useful as a promotion mechanism when you're having to change base values or just manage versioning in general across your applications. And that's why I like it, and I use it quite extensively personally.
Christian, anything you would add to the positive case here?
Yeah, well, just to, I guess, another way to say the olive branch, right? Like how Kostis says, right? Because like I do agree, a lot of people say like, oh, this is great new technology, but I want to keep doing the same thing I'm doing, right? So there's like a lot of that. So like from that aspect, like I understand. And actually from what I read, I actually kind of like mostly actually agree with like philosophically, right? From the blog post, right? But like from my perspective, right? And I think because Gerald's touching on a lot of it, right? Is my perspective is actually philosophical. So can I get more philosophical here, Dan? Like, is that okay? I know this is a tech show.
Yeah. Let's up
a little bit more philosophical, right? So I think a lot of the things was for me was that there's a lot of things that and I'm really splitting hairs here, is where you talk about things that are best practices versus things that are anti-patterns, right? And versus things that we don't like, right? For instance, right, like there was a thread, right, about how someone, quote unquote, hacked the way to do sharding, right, by creating, you basically create 3 definitions, but all pointing to the in cluster, right? And so that way you get like sharding, even though you have one cluster.
Yeah.
I don't like that. I personally don't like that, right? Because what you're doing is you're kicking the can about like, there's something wrong with your syncs, right? Where if it's taking so much things, right, for one cluster, but I wouldn't go as far as calling it a anti-pattern, right? I would say I don't like that, and these are the reasons why I don't like that, right? And there's also things that are like best practices, right? Like these are like best practices, right? And there's maybe situations where you might deviate from one to another, right? And there's the things that are like anti-patterns, right? So again, like splitting hairs here, right? But like, hey, I'm going to turn off reconciliation and just rely on webhooks, right? And that's how I'm doing GitOps. It's like, well, that's not GitOps, right? That's an anti-pattern, right? That's not GitOps, right? So for me, it's really like splitting hairs here, right? Like if you are, if there's reasons and good reasons to not do things and do things right, I would categorize that into the best practices bucket versus like anti-patterns bucket, right? And the reason for that is like, again, like situations, like I use OCI heavily, right? And from that aspect, right, like I render those, like, well, not just OCI, just OCI with rendered manifest, right? And from that aspect, right, target revision I'm using a lot, right? Because like you at that point you're pointing to like a SHA, right, or a human readable tag, and so being able to differentiate and deploy different versions of like applications, right? So I think for me, from the article, is really the preview environments section, right? Is like, well, like I do that a lot, right? Like I literally just deploy an Argo CD app and I'm changing like the tag or the shower, like, target revision, to be able to see that, right? Like that we use Argo heavily internally here at Isovalent, is that we need to like preview and in our CI/CD system, right, when we're testing new releases, we need to see how that behaves, right? And what we're changing the target revision, because someone pushed a different version, and that renders it into a different OCI repository with that tag, right? So maybe like my use case is very, very specific to like that OCI rendered manifest things, because like I'm reading the thing and it's like, I actually agree with a lot of it, right? I don't think I don't think Kostas, you wrote anything like too outlandish, right? I think it's like one of those like nitpicking situations for me, right? Where it's like, oh yeah, there's situations like Gerald brought up. It's like, yeah, I can totally see that. I can totally see someone doing that. And there's a good reason to do that, right? So I was just my philosophical answer.
to your point, Christian, like we're big fans of the pull request generator from Argo CD, right? And what does the pull request generator do? It creates an application that will exist temporarily, and it's pointed specifically at a pull request at the head of whatever that pull request is. So as you make changes to it, it'll automatically get deployed, right? So it's not like we're saying that the field should be removed from Argo CD. Like it has these usages that make sense, especially in an automated environment where it's like, yeah, it's like, like this is a temporary application. It's pointed at a pull request specifically, not just at like head of a repository. So it makes sense that you would do it that way. But so to come back to like the very pragmatic level, Gerald, one of the reasons that you brought up to use this was to limit customized bases, like picking up bases accidentally. And I thought that was an interesting use case, because if you have like, so let's say I've got my, essentially what your setup is, I'm in a single repository. I have a base folder and then I have an overlay folder that's pointing back at that base. By controlling the revision, I control the version of both of those files at the same time. So if the base changes a bunch, if the overlay changes a bunch, it doesn't matter. I only take the new version when I update the revision. Now, the other way to solve this that I had put into the Reddit thread is that you can version your bases. So if you version your bases, this is something that I always do with Kustomize, where when you set up your bases, whether they're remote bases or locally, you can just always treat them as remote. And you put on the end of the URL the tag of the version of the base that you're relying on. And then I, as a consumer of the overlay, because you could imagine a situation where the base is held by a different team and I'm the consumer of it, I subscribe to the version that I want to deploy in the same way that I would do with that. I would do that with the Helm chart too. Like this is something that we've talked about a little bit, is that like, I don't think anybody should actually reference a Helm chart directly, basically ever, from an application. I always create a local Helm chart with a values file, and I just reference the chart that I want to deploy as a dependency with the version in it, so that I can just manage it in the manifest. And the benefit of this is that if I look at my Git repo and I just look at the manifest, I just know what's deployed. I don't have to have any understanding or logic tree that's taking place on the application. I can just do it by just looking at the manifests as they are. I don't have to know which versions of which things are deployed. And that is one of the things that you give up when you do this revision mechanism, right? Is you lose the ability to just look at the repo and know it's deployed. You have to go application by application and see exactly what the logic is to see what's deployed. So that's one of my things. But yeah, go ahead, Gerald. Sorry.
So for me, if another team controls the base, i.e., and you're doing the overlay, then fine, remote references are a great way to go. But if it's the same team, to me, it's just obfuscation. You're adding a tag at the end of the customization. It's not clear to anybody unless they actually go into Git, drill into that customization file, look at that tag, what version is actually being picked up. Whereas with target revision, it's very clear looking at the application what revision is being picked up. The other problem with remote references is it forces Argo CD to do two gets from the Git, or two clones from the Git, because you got to get one for the original customization and another clone Kustomize will do in order to get the remote reference, right? So from a performance point of view, it's not great, but generally it probably is not an end of the world type thing, but it's just something I wanted to highlight with that as well. So for me, I feel like target revision is still a better solution than remote references for that particular use case.
Kostas, anything that you would add onto that one?
Yeah, I want to add something generic again. If you look at the article several times, there are comics with people, and it shows, how people feel about each situation. And I've said this many times before, but I was a developer, 10 years ago, so I really feel the pain of developers. And if you look at any big company, usually there is a big asymmetric number between like developers and operations. So if you have, let's say, a big company where there are 500 developers, and let's say 5 people doing operations, at least for me, it makes sense to make the life easy for the 500 people, not for the 5. So several times I see companies where there is a lockdown process, like a heavy process that might make sense to the operators or the Argo CD administrators, but really makes the life difficult for developers. So coming now to the target revision thing, a good choice for me would also to make this transparent to developers, like either create another abstraction on top of that or have some kind of automation. So if you tell to me, hey, developers don't even need to know about target revision because I have this automated process X that does things for them, updates things for them, automates promotions, then I'm fine. But as soon as you expose this complexity to developers, then I'm unhappy. So coming back, to the discussion, when I ask a company, why are you doing this practice and why you think it's a good idea, I also expect some kind of analysis. Hey, this is what keeps developers happy or operations happy. Because if if all your choices come down to your developers are unhappy and you're making their life miserable, and maybe the operation team is happy, the 5 people, then I'm against that. So it's okay to have some things that work with the process of the company, but always think about the developer experience and try to automate stuff. So coming back, to the promotion and the locking down basis, my next question would be, do developers actually need to know about all this? Like, do they care? Is it something that, it's getting exposed to them? Or it's something that you can automate where they just do the initial deployment to their first environment and then they do other stuff and they know that behind the scenes, it will go from dev to QA to staging to production. And behind the scenes, it can use target revision, but a developer doesn't really care. So if you look at all the comics is when the life of developers is becoming miserable because they have to learn Argo CD specific stuff and Argo CD hacks and Argo CD things. So that's my point regarding what Gerald was talking about.
And that's a fair point, and I agree with it because the operations are always far less people than the developers. So in my experience, what I prefer to do is the dev environment or the first environment is always running off head. It's getting every change. People could see their changes right away, test them, etc. It's really the subsequent environments like stage of production that get target revision. And in companies that have those rigid change control practices I mentioned earlier, they typically will then have a release process that will update the application with that target revision in an automated way. Somebody might say, yes, let's deploy tag v.1.2.1 in terms of what they want deployed, but the actual updating of the applications is done through an automated process. It's not a human having to go into Git, update target revision, and commit the application.
Do you think that so like in your case, do you have a different folder for production staging, or these are all pointing at the same folder in Git?
Yeah, it's the same repo, different folders. So you have a base.
So each environment is still pointing at different folders.
Oh yeah. Well, that really depends on the organization. Are they mono repo, which I'm not a big fan of, or are they per app team. And it goes to Costas's point as well. And I think you had a great pattern on this as well, Costas, in terms of the spectrum of operations and developers and who manages what, right? Like I have some customers where operations does everything on the cluster, including managing the Argo applications and the manifests and all that stuff. And the developers just write code, right? Then I have the other spectrum where the operations team says, here's a bunch of namespaces. Here's Argo as a service. Developers, knock yourself out. And if there's a problem, that's on you to solve, unless you really need to drag us into it, right? So it really kind of depends on that spectrum, Dan, where things kind of end up that way. Where in that spectrum the customer is in terms of how they do things.
Because it's one of
Dan,
these.
this is number 13. If you want to show the picture of number 13, it shows exactly what Gerald was talking about.
It's a great picture that Costas has there. And that's a pattern I can get fully behind. There's not a, it's not a right way or a wrong way. There's a spectrum of things that, depending on the customer's organizational structure, that will work for them versus another customer that might do it differently.
Yeah. Well, that's like one of the things about target revision field is like, if I see people using it, it's like I instantly have 50 more questions. So I'm like, wait, why are they doing that? And they're like, oh, I'm using it to manage my different environments. So I'm like, oh, wait, you're using like different branches for environments? So like, yeah, I'm using branches for environments. I'm like, oh no. It's like a lot of times it's like the harbinger of doom. Like it means like I need to check under every floorboard and check behind every door.
And to be very clear, I'm not talking about branches. I'm talking about, a version of the repo, right?
Yeah. Or tags or a revision or SHA or whatever.
Some of our tags are definitely my favorite, but I've used different types of tags as well. And to get to reiterate Costas's point, you really want to avoid, tags are not immutable either in containers or in Git, but you tend to have either floating tags or sticky tags, right? Or tags that aren't floating. Floating would be like a dev, QA, prod type tag. Those are terrible. Don't use floating tags. But if you use semvar tags, while you can technically change them, so it's not a security mechanism, you're not going to, and they're meant to pin to a specific revision of the repo at that particular point in time, right? And that's
as long as you lock it down. We certainly have seen cases in supply chain attacks where people have gone and overwritten those semver tags. So people they're like, oh, it's okay, I didn't pull any new version. It's like, you actually did pull the new version. You just didn't know that you pulled the new version. I want to go to one of the questions from LinkedIn. Iftash asks, what is the impact in terms of Git API calls when using each of these methods? So I think the two methods being Git revision versus changing Git revisions to specify this versus using a version base. Now, Gerald, you did point out that if you use a version base, that means for that application, it needs to have not only the head, but it also needs to get that revision. So it's going to do an additional API call. But I think actually, if we were to benchmark this, Gerald, I suspect it might not be an issue, or at least there might not be really a disadvantage to doing that from a Git performance standpoint, because if you're using target revision, what you're saying is that every single application may be pointed at a different target revision. So instead of hitting the Git cache that's just sitting there for all my applications, so I might have 20 or 30 applications hitting a single cache, I now have maybe all of them needing to have 20 or 30, or each of them they're having their own different caches. So I suspect it's one of those situations where, like, if we benchmark it, it's going to depend on the repo and the setup to see which one actually is more impactful. Though in general, like, neither of these Git operations are ones that I would really worry about in terms of your organization. Now, if you've got 50,000 applications and you're still using the default Git API limit, you might want to do some optimization. But like in general, most people aren't having issues, with these kind of Git API calls. It is something you should track, and it is something that you can enable, and you can put in Prometheus, and you can look at your Git API calls, and you can make sure you're living under it. But do you disagree with that? Do you think?
Nope. I think generally the performance aspect is a secondary concern.
Yeah.
I think for me, the bigger concern with the remote reference to me is it's very obfuscated and buried in the manifest. That's the largest concern I have with that. versus the Git performance, which is kind of, like I said, a secondary thing. I do have some customers that struggle with Git and rate limiting, and so they're really trying to minimize their calls, but that's fairly rare in my experience.
See, what's interesting is you say, hey, it's buried in the manifest. And I'm like, no, it's buried in the application manifest, right?
Yeah,
Because I'm always
again,
looking at just the manifest. And it's like, oh, if I'm looking at like a Kustomize, in the customization, it specifies all of the bases, you know, all the resources and any versions that are sitting there. So I should see it just in like the first file I look at, versus if I need to look at the application, I always keep those separate, right? Like I have my application manifest sitting in an entirely different folder, a different place. And so I would see it in the Argo CD UI if I clicked on like details. But if I click on like view source or view change, and I wanted to know like, oh, what version has been deployed, I would expect that I'm looking in Git at the manifests. And so when I view the last sync result, it's going to show me the files that changed there in the diff, because I'm not thinking that diffs happen to the application manifest. You know what I'm saying? Because to do that, I would need to be in the app of apps or something, looking at that resource, or looking at that in like the details and knowing that it changed and looking at the history. How do you look at the history of it? Do you just click on history to see like does it show how the target revision has changed?
I don't know if it shows the target revision, but you know, for me, going back to Costas's point about the ops team is small, the developers are large. The problem with having the remote reference and the version in there is, from an ops team perspective, now I got to go track down that customized file, look at it in Git, and figure out what got deployed, versus just seeing the target revision in the application object right in the Argo CD UI, right? It's very clear to me what version is deployed when I look at target revision, whereas using a remote reference and Kustomize, it's much more problematic.
Because you want to look at the manifests of that target revision. Well, they would still show up as part of your Argo CD diff, right? Like it would show up
as an ops guy. If I'm trying to answer the question, what version is this? I don't want to have to start plumbing through the developer manifest to figure it out, is what I'm getting at, right? Just put it in the target revision. It's Captain Obvious. This is the version that's deployed. And if I need to clone the repo,
if I click on like the last sync revision, it will show me the diff in Git of what changed, and that will include different target revision for the base.
Absolutely.
Right? So it'll specify that different version. But I guess you're saying that like, okay, but like I want to go to that next layer and understand what changed in that file. Now, if they're in the same Git repo, then it's not gonna make a clickable link.
I'm more like the ops guy's troubleshooting for the developer. Like, why isn't this working? Right. So he's trying to figure out, okay, why am I getting this diff? And now he needs to figure it out in the repo. And I find that remote references make that more difficult, not easier, but that's just my 2 cents. The other one I kind of want to look at, and maybe Costas can chime in on this, is the anti-pattern 19, which kind of ties into this.
Yeah, let me pull it up.
Which is managing promotions. So like, I like using target revision to manage promotions, as you can probably tell. I'm very fond of that approach. And what's laid out,
the anti-pattern 19 is attempting to version and promote applications or application sets. On Argo CD Application, it's just a link between a cluster and Git repo. There is no version field in the application CRD. So instead, you're just changing the target manifest.
Right. If you scroll down, it actually mentions somewhere the target revision.
Yeah. It mentions it down here. Like we can see several of these try to use applications as a unit of work or continuously update those files in the target revision field, see anti-pattern number 11, which is the one we've been talking about.
Yeah. So if you're not using that Git remote reference, the only other way to manage this is copying things around between the base and the overlays, or like my multi-Helm chart example, to copying it between base value files and overlays. And the problem with that is that it's kind of violating a principle I like to have with testing, which is you're not testing what you deployed earlier in later environments, because you're manually making changes to support that, right? So that's another reason why I'm a big fan of target revision. It's basically ensuring that what I deployed in, say, dev or stage is what I've got deployed in prod. Exactly that. If I start having to manually monkey with the manifests, then I'm starting to get into the territory of I'm not really testing what I deployed earlier. Somebody can make a mistake, like your remote reference. Somebody's trying to update it in prod. They typo it and they put in something else, doesn't get caught. And the pull request, it gets merged, and all of a sudden prod's not the right version anymore, right? That you expected. So that's another reason why I'm kind of not a fan of that. And I have a long story I could tell about how I got burned by doing builds for specific environments in the past and why I'm so keen on that particular facet of things. But this one, anyways, long story short, this Andy pattern kind of ties into the target revision because I am a fan of using target revision to manage promotions.
Yeah, there's kind of a question here of like, how do you do promotions, right? And if the way that you do promotions is by always just copying and pasting a change manually, I could see that leading to different values, whereas we would probably say like, hey, your promotions should be typically automated. And so like, there's no risk of somebody not copying it. But Kostas, what do you think about Gerald's point here?
So I have too many points, and I think we are going to the next discussion about promotions that we have done so many times. First of all, the main point of that anti-pattern was actually not the target revision thing, but people trying to version application sets and applications. Mm-hmm. So an application set is a way to generate applications. Okay, that's a helper for you to generate applications. But an application set is not actually deployed. Like, yes, you can see it in Argo CD UI in the next release and so on, but it's not like your unit of work. Your unit of work is application, and application sets are just a way to group applications. So people try to usually group application sets in a Helm chart, which also goes to the other anti-pattern about the Helm sandwich, and put a version in the application set and then try to move application sets between its environments, which is a very complex process for so many reasons that I won't even go because it's another anti-pattern in the Helm chart. But for me, it's always important to understand where we are in the ecosystem. So right now, if you look at the promotions field, there are, as we have said many times, many different solutions like Cargo, GitOps Promoter, and I don't think we have reached the point yet where everything is fully automated. So I agree in principle that if you try to copy things around, you will have problems. But my argument here is it should not be a human. If you have a human copying things around, yes, you're doing a mistake, and yes, you will have systems. But if you have an automated process that understands what's getting copied, it should be bulletproof. And for me also, it's also the discussion on how often things happen. Like, so many people talk about processes and they think the happy path scenario. I have a process in dev, it goes to QA, it goes to staging, and everything is great, and then it wakes, and I have the next one, and things work great. But I always challenge people and say, okay, talk to me about the edge case scenario. What happens if there is a decision to not move this change in production, to stay in staging, then the next change is coming over, and that needs to go to production. Or you deploy two things to production, and that one needs to be reverted. So some of the advice I have there is bulletproof in the sense that if you have an understanding of what gets promoted, the edge case scenarios are no longer edge case. There is something that you can use in the exact same way. Well, if you have a process that works great, for the happy path scenario, but as soon as something happens, you say, yeah, there is an operation guy that goes there and manually does stuff, then you have lost me. Like, this is not, the process I like. So I think from this discussion, we are missing a tool that does this intelligently. And I think it's great, to also talk about the future. So I'm not talking to the anti-patterns about what we have today. This is boring. This is also a hidden, let's say, motivation for people to explain what we need. And everybody knows that we need a smart promotion engine for Argo CD. Because if we had this smart promotion engine for Argo CD, we wouldn't even talk about target revisions, manual copying, folders, and all this stuff. It would be taken care of. So that's my main point. No, you shouldn't think about manual copying, even though in some of my articles, just for illustration purposes, I talk about manual copies for people to understand the process, but it shouldn't be a manual thing.
Yeah.
And I agree with you on the automation. I think like changing an image, for example, in an application is a great example of an automated change that's easy to do and should be fully automated, whether using Kustomize or Helm. It's when you get into the more complicated changes where it becomes difficult, particularly with Kustomize, maybe less so with Helm, because Helm black boxes the manifest. But with Kustomize, for example, if I'm deploying a new image and then I need to add a config map, or I need to, even worse, change a config map and a bunch of settings in it, those are the kind of things that are difficult to automate. You can automate it by maybe bundling a script or some sort of automation tool with it to do that change. But, you know, the reality, I think, for now anyways, is that it would be difficult to manage all of the possible permutations and combinations of changes in a fully automated way.
Well,
So I want to add
Go
something
ahead.
specifically for Kustomize, and I think also, Gerald, this is a good poll for your customers. I have asked so many people if they know Kustomize, and they say, yes, we know Kustomize. And usually what they mean is they know Kustomize overlays, where you have, a strict hierarchy of things that extend other things. And I asked them, hey, what do you know about components, which are the mixins? And almost nobody knows anything about them. So for me, a good question there is, have you thought your process with components? And if you have, then, maybe some of the limitations of Kustomize that you think they are there, they're actually limitations of overlays and the strict hierarchy you have. And if you use components, some of the limitations go away. So it's always a trade-off between the Argo CD knowledge you have versus the customized knowledge or Helm knowledge that you have. And one of the anti-patterns is trying to solve, Argo CD issues with limited knowledge of the basic tools.
Yeah.
So if you're watching this show and you're using Kustomize, please learn about Kustomize components.
Components are great, but they don't solve this problem, in my opinion.
It's just an example that you should know. You should know the tool and all the capabilities before you try to solve stuff with Argo CD. I'm not saying it will solve the problem. I'm just saying understand what else is there for Kustomize before you come into Argo CD.
Right. Absolutely. On that, I agree on that one.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Jaron.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, I get customers saying, should I know Helm or should I use Helm or should I use Kustomize? I would say use both, because there are use cases where one is much better than the other.
Yeah.
And you can be Kustomize first, but you'll still need to use some Helm, and you can be Helm first. You probably still need to use some Kustomize.
No, for a long time, I never would deploy a Helm chart. I would always deploy a customization that consumed a Helm chart. I've softened on that to some degree, where most of the time now my default is I just make a umbrella chart and reference it, and then I can just manage it all, in my local files, which I feel like is a better pattern. And then if you need to use Kustomize, it's there. You can swap it in. Rather than go back into the implementation here, let's take a couple of questions from the audience. So first of all, we've got Vivek here, says he'd like his first job with DevOps and that Argo CD, he wants it to help. Hey, hire this guy because he's got great taste in podcast discussions. So good job, Vivek. You've chosen correctly. I would say go post this on LinkedIn, because YouTube is a terrible place to find a job. Nobody's on there looking for jobs, but on LinkedIn, they're probably looking to hire people.
That's probably something we can all agree with right there, right?
yeah.
If you want to look for a job, don't go on YouTube. Go on.
Yeah, don't go on YouTube. Yeah. Luke asked where my background went. I'm on vacation, so you get a different background. This is this is Carmen Sandiego. See to track the clues within the visuals and see if you can come back with your guesses of where I am. Closest gets a prize, which is a high five next time I see you. Luke asked, and he asked this a while ago, so we'll see if it's still relevant, but he just asked, how about star glob patterns, not in ephemeral environments? And I wasn't sure exactly what it was in a reference to, Luke, so I didn't bring it up earlier. Any guesses?
I think he means the new feature of Helm that you can put stars in the values, but I don't remember if it's also available for ephemeral environments. It was in the previous release or the last release. Do you remember, Christian or Gerald?
I think
Nope.
it was, yeah.
So normally in an Argo CD application, if you use like a Helm chart, you can put the Helm chart and then Helm values, and you have to put the Helm values one by one. Say value staging, values production, values whatever. So if you have 10 files, you have to put 10 files. But if you do a smart naming, let's say you name them all values minus something, you can put a values minus star there, and then it can work. That's my understanding, if they mean something like that.
Oh, he means
Oh, he's
No,
just saying
the
no.
star.
Target references can have a star.
Oh
glob.
no, I don't like that.
Ooh, I don't like that either. Yeah. I don't.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. This is one of the features where I personally think that Argo CD should not have. Okay, and you can quote me on this. It is a poor man's promotion mechanism where you say, I want 2.x, okay, 2.x. And this includes everything that is 2.1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So not only you don't know exactly, what is running right now, but if I come and ask you, hey, what was running last Thursday? You don't know.
It's funny.
Maybe it was
Coach,
2.2, maybe it was 2.3.
If you took the two positions, which are use head or use target revisions, then you would say that using a target ref with a glob pattern focused on like a semver would be the middle ground. You're kind of pointed at head in a way, but it sounds like this particular compromise has made both parties absolutely upset.
Yeah.
I think I have a picture
Congrats,
with the unhappy developers with this one.
I agree with Costas on this one.
Yeah, Dan, if you open the article and search for avoid using semantic ranges in targetRevision and put the comic with the people there, I think this shows my answer perfectly, and I'm happy that everybody agrees with me. I also need to remind people that, we talk about Argo CD for enterprises, but some people use Argo CD in their home lab, in their house, and some of the features from Argo CD make sense in an environment like this, but they don't make sense in an enterprise setting and in a big company. So if you're using the stars, in your own home lab, great, fine.
That's fine.
But if you use it in a big company, I don't think it's a good practice.
Hey, you guys were just talking about the new version of Helm, even though that wasn't the thing that wasn't the thing that Luke was talking about. But it is a good time to mention that Argo CD 3.5 release candidate is out, and it includes, for the very first time, support for Helm 4. So if you were one of those people that was like, I can't use Argo CD, it doesn't have Helm 4 support yet. Well, guess what? We got you. This is a feature that Reggie from Octopus Deploy added. So we really appreciate that. And it is maintaining backwards compatibility for existing Helm 3 deployments. So go ahead and grab that. If you haven't read yet the Argo CD 3.5 blog post, it is on the Argo project blog post. This is a huge release, actually. I think this is our biggest release since 3.0. Lots of features, impersonation, moving to beta, which is very important. Source hydrator advancing to beta, separate repositories for dry and hydrated manifest, which is very important. Application sets getting native support inside of Argo CD UI, so you can actually see your application sets for the very first time. App sets in any namespace, application set concurrency control, application set proxy URL, tons of features there. MTLS support for repo server. Everything else has actually had support in the past, but now you can actually add your own certificates and improve the security. Great addition. So all kinds of changes in there. Be sure to check out that blog post and this release. Lots of stuff from Red Hat, from Intuit, a couple features from BlackRock, from Acuity. Of course, Octopus Deploy is leading this release, and as well as lots of community contributions coming along with it. So Argo CD 3.5, go check out the release candidate. That's kind of news item number one. And then news item number two, to make everybody aware of as we round the bend, and feel free to put some questions into the chat and we'll try to address those before we end the stream. But we also have a new version of the rollouts plugin for Gateway API plugin for Argo rollouts. This is a really cool plugin for Argo rollouts. Kostas did the last release 5 days ago, and we were just talking this morning because we were pretty excited to see that this release already has 78,000 downloads. for this new version.
I'm
So
excited about this one for sure. It's great.
Yeah, have you tried it yet, Christian?
Yeah, I've been playing around with it. I'm actually gonna release some things around it. This is great. I'm gonna call back to Costas, definitely around.
There is an example with Cilium already in the providers. There is an example with Cilium, so Christian is happy.
Yeah, definitely.
Phenomenal. Then going to our other news items, we're going to be celebrating this one for a long time, I think. And I'm sorry to call it out in front of a Christian and Gerald, who represent Red Hat and of course Isovalent, who are great contributors, especially Red Hat. But Octopus Deploy is the #1 contributor, according to LFX stats, on the Argo project for the last year. And that is not just on Argo CD. It's on the entire Argo project. Now, gentlemen, I just want to brag about the OSS team at Octopus Deploy. I'm just astonished by what they've been able to accomplish this last year. And I think it's always good for an OSS project to have a little bit of gentle competition between maintainers to be like, hey, we're doing more. Like, no, we're going to do more. So Red Hat, of course, huge contributor, especially on Argo CD. Red Hat doesn't really do stuff on Argo workflows, but on Argo CD is one of the main maintainers. So we appreciate you, Gerald, and the work that your team is doing as well, for sure. And then lastly, no, go ahead. Sorry.
DJ horn. You needed a DJ horn, right? For like,
Baby.
yeah. I think that would be, if you had that sound effect, I think that'd be cool.
So the last thing, hey, KubeCon, ArgoCon, lots happening there. ArgoCon Japan is happening in 1 month and a week. If you're not registered to go to the ArgoCon Japan yet, get registered. It's going to be sold out event. Tickets are going to be gone. I guarantee it. So get those tickets early. If you haven't yet, they may already be sold out. And ArgoCon North America CFP just closed. So if you didn't get your talk in, you're too late. Sorry, friends. If you did have an idea for a talk that you'd wanted to do, hey, reach out to me and maybe we can get you into a webinar or something. Maybe we'll get you into another venue, or we can start talking about Europe, because that CFP is going to come up in a couple of months. So you're not too far off from any conference that's going to be happening. Don't let it stop you from deploying stuff. So, hey, we're at near the top of the hour here. I think we've covered the topic. We've talked about some of the different positions. We've talked about maybe the way that we're valuing some different aspects. Ultimately, we're just talking about trade-offs at the end of the day. I suspected that we weren't going to end the conversation with either side capitulating and saying, hey, you know what? You're totally right. We think the thing you're doing is the right way to do it. Did anybody change their mind? Christian, I thought you were the closest to potentially being on the fence, because I feel like you were kind of in this camp of like, oh, I see the value of this, but I also see the value of that.
Yeah, I think for most things, I think that I am like probably on the fence, right? On some of these things, right? I think
Christian, you're basically Switzerland when it comes to these
exactly. Well, they just cut off their immigration status. Maybe I can't go in Switzerland, but maybe I can be in Switzerland. I think like you said, Dan, I think you pick up a very, very good point. A lot of the things is like, I think is just trade-offs, right? Like for me, like I'm a big OCI rendered manifest person, but there's definitely trade-offs, right? And it's like, you have to be like, okay, the advantages in my situation, it will overtake the disadvantages that I may need to work around, right? And I think that's like a lot of the reason why this why I think it was great that you brought like all of us together. Like that conversation is important, right? Because at the end of the day, it's like it's advantages and disadvantages. But let's I think as a community, we need to like kind of like, again, to maybe on Costa's side a little bit, maybe like try to guide them towards like, yeah, like don't shoot off your foot, maybe that, right? Like it's you have to have good reasons, behind some of these things, right? Which I think Gerald brings up good reasons, right? So I think I'm very Switzerland from that aspect, right? Like, yeah, it's good, but Gerald, I guess in my screen, yeah, that's great. But Gerald brings up some good points that we need to talk about.
Well, if you were convinced one way or the other, we'd love to hear about it. Be sure to put your comments in the chat, bring it up on the Argo CD subreddit, or yell about it in the Argo CD Slack, or even the GitOps Champions Discord. There are so many ways to let us know that you think we did it wrong.
So many ways to complain. Yeah.
Yeah. So send those all in. We'd love to hear about it. Gerald, any final words?
No, but this was really, really great. And it's always fun discussing this stuff with you and Costas. You guys have a great vantage point. So thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate you, Gerald, bringing the counterpoint here. And it's a fun discussion. Costas, any closing argument, or not argument, any closing comment?
Thank you for coming and talking about your experience. See.
All right, folks. Well, thank you again for joining us for another episode of Argo Unpacked. As always, stay synced.
Argo Unpacked. Stay synced.